and welcome to Books from Your Therapist, a podcast where we talk to therapists and mental health practitioners about their mental health related book recommendations. By mixing book talk with mental health, we hope to open up the conversation about books your therapist may have suggested and make them more accessible.
This podcast is not a substitute for mental health care. It's for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm Amanda Throckmorton, a marriage and family therapist in California.
And I'm Tara Kremen, and I work in the book industry in Toronto, in Canada. In this episode, we're actually talking to an author today instead of a therapist, but because the subject is so interesting that we definitely wanted to have her on. We're talking to Anna Goldfarb about her new book, Modern Friendship. Anna is a prolific journalist and friendship explainer, in quotes, whose writing has appeared in The Atlantic, Time, Vice, The Cut, Vox, The Washington Post, and The New York Times.
Modern Friendship is a definitive step-by-step guide to understanding the fundamental mechanics of friendship. Anna shares insights into what is pushing our friendships to the brink and provides actionable advice for forming authentic, enduring connections today.
We're staying on the topic of friendship with our second book, Big Friendship, by Aminatou and Anne Friedman. And we talked to Anna about how this has inspired her own work.
Friendship is a subject that Tara and I talk a lot about, and we loved talking to Anna about it. We hope you enjoy and find some helpful tips for your own friendships.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Anna. We really appreciate having you on the podcast. Welcome.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for people that might not be familiar with your work, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, pronouns, and any parts of your identity that you'd like to share?
Sure. My name is Anna Goldfarb. I go by she and her. I'm a journalist. I talk to people for a living. I see what's up. I see what everyone's missing about whatever topic interests me. And anything else about my personal, I'm a cat mom.
Excellent.
Sums it up.
And so how did you get your start in writing? Because we're going to focus a lot about your latest book here, but I'd love to hear your writing origin story. Like, were you a kid that always wrote stories, or was it more the journalism and the news seeking that spoke to you?
You know, I never really wrote stories as a kid. But I started getting into music in high school, and I worked at my school radio station, and I loved it. I wanted to work in the music industry. And then I went to college and I worked at the radio station, but I realized I couldn't keep the CDs because everyone had to use the CDs. Long story short, I found out that writing for my school paper, I got to keep the CDs. So I started doing music reviews, really just to get into concerts for free and to get free swag to like be around bands. And I just had so much fun writing, especially about music. I just had a really great time. I had no idea that I could do writing as a living. It was really just no one would hire me. And the music industry basically collapsed when I graduated college. And then I started writing about dating in my 20s and 30s. And that's when I realized I wanted to learn more about the craft of writing. I went back to school. I got my master's in journalism. And then I really started pursuing journalism as a calling. I just felt like, wow, I could dive deep into anything that interests me and get to talk to interesting people. And I just fell in love with journalism.
Nice. I love that. And your first book was all about dating. Like you said, that was kind of what you had previously focused on. But now you've shifted to friendship writing. I love the idea that you're like a friendship correspondent is an excellent job title. I hope you have like that on several business cards. Can you tell us about what inspired the shift there?
You know, I was really fascinated by dating because it was nothing like what I thought it would be like. And I felt the reality of dating was very different than what TV and movie promised us about dating. And I actually drew on my background of writing about bands and writing about music with my blog Schmidt and Kitten, where I reviewed guys' behaviors, similar to it's only interesting if you really love a record or really hate a record. I kind of use that same template to talk about guys' behaviors of like, I love when guys, have extra toothbrushes on hand for when you stay over. And I can't stand when guys have, long fingernails or no ice cube trays in their freezer. So I really kind of had that record review mentality with writing about dating. But I met my husband 3 weeks after my book came out, my first book came out about dating. And I had no interest in talking about dating. I met a really nice guy and I'm like, I'm good. Like, I don't care. I don't want to talk about weird guys anymore. Like I found a really nice one. So I'm just gonna focus on him. But what was interesting is when we got married when I was 39 and my friendships were buckling, they were splintering. And there's just so much churn and change. And I didn't understand what was happening. I really thought that my friendships would go on forever, like in the universe, like no space, like things just go on forever. Like I just thought it would be a
Mm.
bullet in space, just like go
Mhm.
on forever. And I was so shocked that my friendships were really I was really struggling with maintaining them, and I didn't know what my responsibility was in maintaining them. I didn't know what my friends' responsibilities were. I'd moved around so much. And now I had this big identity change of going from like single lady friend to now I'm a wife. And that really sparked a crisis of like, well, what do I owe these longtime friends I've had? I just felt like I was a crummy friend at all times. At all times, I felt guilty. Like I should reach out to my friend. Oh, I missed her birthday. Am I a horrible friend? I forgot to text her. Like it was like carrying around a backpack, a heavy backpack. And, I started reporting for the New York Times in 2017, like right when I got married. And friendship just became this beat that I got to explore of, well, how do we maintain friendships? That was the first one I wrote in 2017. Then it just created more questions for me. Well, how do I rekindle a friendship? Well, how is a friendship different than siblings? Like, how do you care for your siblings? How is that different than a friendship? And I just got to go deeper and deeper into friendships until I got to write this book that feels like I answered all my questions. I feel like I finally have a grip on what the friendship thing's all about.
Well, I mean, the dating book, and then you found your husband, and the friendship book is a very good manual. So your track record is going well so far, I gotta say.
Thank you. I feel like I finally, it's like an owner's manual of like, well, how do we have friends? We've collected all these people in our lives, but how do we regard them? I felt like I had this curiosity cabinets worth of friends from all different parts of my life. And, that's what I found writing this book is that that's part of the burden of modern friendship is that, all these people only share common history with me, not with each other. So there's no help in keeping these friendships humming along. We have to come up with the reasons to keep a friendship active individually. It's a monumental shift of the burden of friendship keeping.
I also love how, you met your partner and then you had, it seems like this secure relationship that allowed you to go out and sort of explore these other relationships. Like I feel like that's such a beautiful testament to kind of how attachment works too, which you do talk a little bit about in your book as well. Like sort of having that secure base and then saying, okay, what other areas do I want to work on? Like what other friendships or relationships do I want to build up on?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Nothing stays the same. I really was so naive. Like I thought, like, oh yeah, well, this is how our friendships are in our 20s, and we're adults now. So this is just adult friendship. And I didn't realize there'd be so many changes through the decades I mean, my friendships in my 20s are so different than in my 30s. Now I'm in my 40s and they're changing again. And it just felt so destabilizing because I didn't see it coming. But
Hmm.
it's like, of course they're different. I'm different. My identity is different. My time obligations are different. My career is different. Like, of course, my friendships are going to be different.
Mm,
So that's been really validating to understand, to see
mm.
and understand.
Well, since we've sort of led there, let's actually talk a little bit more about the book Modern Friendship: How to Nurture Our Most Valued Connections by Anna Goldfarb. One thing that I was wondering as I was reading, I saw a lot of different resources that I've either read or heard of, and I feel like you bring those together in such a well-rounded way. I also love that you touched on neuroscience and attachment. Like from, my therapist brain was like, yes, this is awesome. What did you find most surprising as you learned, like whatever you learned while gathering information for the book? Like what kind of stood out for you or shocked you?
My favorite study that I got to explore, and it was in the late stage of the writing the book. Like I'd already kind of knew the sections I wanted. I wanted exercises. I wanted to bring in my service journalist background of like, here's how to do it. Here's what to know. But it was towards the end when I was looking at social networks and more of the sociology piece of friendship. And that was one of the last things I included, but I thought it absolutely broke the conundrum of modern friendships open, which is I think it's Pescadillo. I hope I say your name right. Like the Pescadillo and Rubin study from 2000, which talked about what the modern social network is like. Well, it's actually postmodern. Like modern is our parents. So postmodern is us, and how we're more like a butterfly and we move around so much. And our social networks are more like a spoke, like a bicycle wheel with us in the middle and these groups of cohorts branching out
Mm,
around us. And they don't know each other. They only know us. And societies that are set up like this, loneliness is inevitable. Like, I mean, it's just inescapable because there's no cohesion. There's no common community that you're drawing from. You have all these different branches with their own history, their own, rhythms and rituals. And it's like, oh, that's exactly what I've been feeling. I grew up in upstate New York. I went to school in Chicago, then I went to college in New York City, and then I moved to Philly. And none of my friends from these different parts of my life know each other. Of course it feels lonely. Of course it feels
mm,
like I'm not from anywhere. Like we have a whole new society experience that's
mm,
historically new. And that made me feel just so validated of there's nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with my capacity to be a friend. I'm just overwhelmed. And it helped me understand that friendships today are like a supermarket. And it's like going to a supermarket when you're starving and you just put anything that your cravings, you know, call to you in your cart and you just put in the most random stuff. And you're like, I want that, you know, the ice cream. I want the bag of chips. And then you check out and you're like, well, how do I make a meal out of any of these random things that my appetites,
mm,
when your appetites are in control, you don't make decisions that are as wise. So it's like, oh, okay, well, when we go shopping with a list and we're full, it's much easier to be in a modern supermarket. You don't get tripped up. And that's the difference. Like our social lives are a supermarket. We can go on social media. We can see what everyone's doing. We can be distracted. We can reach out to someone that we probably may not have business reaching out to at the moment. We have no regard, we have no understanding of where our request lands in this other person's inbox. And we're just bewildered. We're making all these attempts that aren't leading to actual connection. So that's been the biggest, I know I just rambled a lot, but that was the biggest revelation for me was yes, we're in a supermarket, but we need new strategies. It's not the supermarket's fault that I can't figure out what to make for dinner. I need to understand the landscape and the challenges so that I can make the best decisions for myself.
mm. I love that, right? Because the supermarket, as you said, like we can't control that. We can't control our ever-changing, more modern world, right? In technology, but we can sort of control the way we navigate that and where we put our intention. So I think that's such a nice you use a lot of beautiful metaphor and visualizations in the book too. Like I'm thinking about chapter 5. You talk about this idea of identifying, what roles your friends play for you, and then prioritizing them by the layers of connection. I've seen this as like a ladder before. I work in a school, so I talk about this with kids, but I used a bullseye sort of like dartboard method. And so I loved when you brought this in because I use this and I think it's such a helpful tool to sort of show the different categories. But I love that you used water as a way to show the fluidity, right? So can you talk a little bit about your rebrand of this closeness? And you use bathtub, jacuzzi, swimming pool, bonfire, and water park, right? Can you talk a
Well
little bit
done.
about
You
this?
did a great job. Yeah, like these findings are from Robin Dunbar, who's a British anthropologist. He's done extensive work on social networks. I've seen those numbers before of like, here's what a normal, average social network looks like. And just like you said, there's rungs of intimacy, and you have a most intimate rung, which I call the bathtub because I wanted to highlight not many people fit in here. It's really
Mm,
like, what's interesting is for men, it's usually one person, which usually is their significant other. And for women, it's usually two people, their significant other and a best friend. So that alone shows, oh, well, this is a lot of negotiation going on in this bathtub because it can be very different for two people in a romantic relationship. The outer rung is what I call jacuzzi, the jacuzzi friends. And that's 3 to 5 like innermost circle people. And the outer ring is your swimming pool. And I honestly thought of a pool party of like dipping, seeing the jacuzzi, like, and then dipping into the swimming pool a little bit and like hanging out with them and getting some guac and chips by the side of the pool. And really, I wanted to give people permission of it's okay if your friendships fluctuate and go in and out. Nothing's wrong. Is it wrong going to a pool party and like wanting one thing and going to somewhere else? And then that's not wrong either. So I really wanted to take the pressure off of us of, oh, okay, well, these things change a lot. And I wanted people to mark down like, well, who's in your jacuzzi? Who would you go to for financial advice? Who would you go to for workplace advice? Who would you go to celebrate, a birthday? And figure out who those people are and then come back in 6 months. You might be surprised of like, oh, well, actually, that friend just had a baby, so she's had to take a step back. But I have been hanging out with this new intern at work who's I really love. And then you can just see it's like the stop motion photography of a flower blooming. That's what I wanted us to look at our friendships like that of like, oh, it changes month to month. Well, why does it change? It's like, well, what's
mm.
going on in your friend's life? What's going on in your life? Nothing's wrong. It's all good. We can do this. That was my hope of explaining how fluid these tiers are.
No, I think it worked well. I thought it was appropriate as Amanda and I met in person a couple of weeks ago and went to a spa where there was, I mean, maybe not a bathtub, but a jacuzzi swimming pool. And I was like able to like literally visualize the piece. But no, I like that piece a lot. Also, just from like doing this podcast and maybe like going to therapy more, I always have to remind myself that things do change and they are like fluid and like even at you were saying at the beginning with, the social media piece that we do move in and out of relationships with people, that everything isn't so defined. So the book was a good reminder of sort of like just reinforcing that piece as well for me personally. So, and you're clearly like super passionate about like friendships in general. Is there any aspects about friendship that you felt was very important to include in the book, or anything that gets left out of the friendship conversation?
Yeah, I think a huge problem is the failure of TV and movies to show what realistic friendship looks like. It's sort of like that main character syndrome of I want friends to throw a surprise party for me. I want friends to reach out to me to celebrate me. And we see movies, like I was thinking about this Harry Potter. Everybody wants to be the Harry Potter. Nobody wants to be the Ron Weasley, of I'm the one who's like, I'm the hero of the story. But so much of friendship is showing up for other people and playing a supporting role to other people. And that gives a lot of happiness and contentment and purpose and meaning to get to witness and be a part of our friends' lives. I think that we have main character syndrome and people think, I want people showing up for me. And that makes us miserable. It makes us miserable. It makes us feel like no one will ever measure up. Our friends are never going to be good enough. They can never fill that void of, I want people caring for me at all times. It sets us up for extreme disappointment. It's like, no, dude, the key is to be the Ron Weasley. It's to be the one who's like, I'm here to help. I care about you and I'm here to help. That gives us meaning. And that's the antidote to loneliness, is not taking stock of who shows up for me and why. It's, who do I want to show up for? Who do I want to invest in? Who do I want to care about?
I love that. I think that's really beneficial and something that I definitely want to be able to take away. One thing that stood out to me as well is you were saying that it's like you know who your boyfriend is, you know who your girlfriend is, your partner, but you don't actually know who your best friend is. It's not really defined, like friendship doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily have that conversation. And especially when a friendship sort of ends, it's not often that that
Mhm.
conversation happens. I mean, sometimes it can be unclear as to what's happening, or something can kind of fizzle out. So do you have any advice for people that are kind of dealing with the grief of a friendship? Because it's not something that's really like talked about a lot, but I think it's really important.
It's absolutely not talked about. And we have no rituals for friendships that fall apart. We have so many examples of with a breakup. Here's how you handle it. Here's what you say. Here's what you can expect. But with a friendship breakup, there's such ambiguity around it. Like you said, there a lot of times there isn't a conversation. It's just a drifting or just abandonment. And it's upsetting. But what I learned is that it's not so much that we're grieving the person, we're grieving the role that they played for us. Because we separate from friends all the time. It's not always a bad thing. It's not always a distressing thing. I fall in and out of touch, I mean, we're all so busy. We're just doing the best we can. But it's those painful ones where that friend probably played a really important role for you. And that's what hurts, is that you're losing that person who was a champion for you, or who was a collaborator and tried new things with you, or a mind opener, someone who introduced you to new bands and new film directors. And I think it can help to understand what it is you're grieving too. And also to understand, like, what are common reasons friendships fall apart, and to take ownership of, did I do something? Is there a misunderstanding? Like, I think that my book is really, I'm really hoping people can diagnose past hurts and take the sting out of it of, oh, I misunderstood, what was needed for me at the time. I misunderstood how to rise to the occasion or the moment. Most people don't want to piss off their friends. Most people are just doing the best they can. And I think the best thing we can do for our friends is to be flexible and be open, and to give the benefit of the doubt and maybe take ownership of, I didn't tell my friend what I needed in that moment, but I realize I'm telling myself a story about what happened. I think it takes a lot of maturity to realize that we have a tendency to do that. We can easily do that. We can generate stories. I mean, I'm sure you guys see this all the time with your clients and people you work with. Like, the absence of information, we rush to fill in those gaps with a self-generated story that most likely reflects our own insecurities, not actually what's happening. So I've learned to not jump to conclusions, or to be more curious and not so quick to assume a friend, like, there's any kind of animosity. It's like, oh, well, maybe they just got busy. Well, do they have a reason to be in touch with me? Well, let's go through choice theory. Let's go see, like, have I been helping this friend? What's going on in their life? Was my message a good one? Did I send a text message that was really low effort? and basically put all the onus on them to reply with a date and time to meet up. Like, oh, what was my part in this, in making this friendship drift?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot that's needed in terms of like being active in your relationships, right? And I think that this book does such a good job of, it feels like action oriented. And this isn't just happening to you, like you actually have a say in how this goes. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about how sometimes I see young friendships sort of framed as practice for getting into romantic relationships, or if you wouldn't accept this from a friend, like you shouldn't accept this from like a potential dating like romantic partner. And I think that there's at some point like a fork where it's like, okay, now our focus is the romantic relationship, right? And that's sort of our goal, at least sort of in the culture that I live in the systems that I participate in. So yeah, just notice that as you were talking, like, wow, it's funny how that switches, right? The focus is then, okay, this served a purpose, these young friendships, and now your focus is this. So I love that the book is, like I said, just such you're an active participant, and it's kind of on you to look at this, your side of it, right? And yeah, reaching out for connection and being active is a big part, right? And the book gives really good practical and concrete strategies, and and how to assess your own friendships, give advice, and be a better friend. It made me think about the education that's lacking for kids and teens to learn these skills. As I was reading this, I kept thinking, gosh, I wish I learned this as a kid. Like I was thinking about my own heartache and grief as a kid, not understanding the fluidity of relationships. Do you have any thoughts on how we can like educate youth, or any thoughts for parents on how to make wholehearted friendships and teach your kids about it?
I didn't know any of this stuff either. So like I'm right there with you of, oh, I had no idea that people were responding to me. What I'm hoping I'm hoping this book makes people feel empowered of, our friendships aren't just wild horses that drag us around here to there. It's like, no, 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 no. We have agency here. Why does someone want to be my friend? Okay, well, let's look at it. I think that for young people, I think there's a message of, if you're nice to people, they'll be your friend. And it can be very confusing when you're nice and polite and you extend an
Mm,
invitation and someone's not receptive. You're like, well, I did all the
mm,
things. I was nice. I said, do you want half of my cookie? And they said no, and they don't want to hang out with me. What's happening? I was promised that if you're just nice to people, they'll want to be friends with you. And, people are complicated, but they're also simple. And it's more like, well, do you care about what they care about? Do you help them with things that are important to them? Are you a good friend? Are you reliable? Are you trustworthy? Like, what are you bringing to the table? I think that there's a entitlement to friendship that people have when they're young of, well, we were friends for a few years, so you should be my best friend forever.
mm,
It feels very scary to evaluate, like, well, what about our friendship today? Well, you're actually interested in lacrosse and I'm into theater. Well, it makes sense that we'd want to be around people who share our interests. I remember these friendship breakups when I was much younger, and it felt so personal. It
mm.
felt like such rejection and, again, abandonment. And I think we could do a better job explaining to children that friendships are very fluid, and they are based on, every friendship needs an about. It needs to be based on something, and those things are going to change. It's okay. I used to be have a scarcity mindset with my friendships. Like I would be very threatened if they got too close to someone else. I mean, I would just like might be burning with jealousy and rage. Like, what the heck? What do you mean you want to be friends with someone else? Well, I don't like her. Why do you like her? And it was just this crisis. I wish that I could go back and tell younger people that, listen, that's not helping anyone. You have to be like, I love this for you. Go make a new friend. Like, people will want to be your friend if you're flexible and open and confident. Of like, I love that you're making new friends. That sounds great. Go have a good time. Let me know if there's anything you think I'd like to do. I'd love to join, but go do you. I support your growth and I'm not threatened by it. And friends will want to be your friend longer than if you try
Mm.
to like control them or dominate them. And I think people misunderstand that with friendships. It's a relationship of peers, of equals, and friends do not like to be dominated. If you tell your friend too much what to do, they're gonna recoil. They're gonna be like, I'm not dealing with this. I have parents telling me what to do. I have, my significant other telling me what to do. I have my boss telling me what to do. I don't want my friend being like, you can't be friends with her. You can't do that. Like, get out of here. Not gonna work. It's not gonna work. That's not how this any of this works. That's a message I wish I could give friends, younger people about friendship is be flexible, be open, and people will want to be your friend. You will get what you want much easier.
I always wonder about like if I was to talk to my younger self. I don't know how I would receive the advice. I mean, I wish I had it, but I feel like my younger brain would have just been like, no, I'm just gonna keep going.
I made a miscalculation when I was younger that affection was enough to sustain a friendship indefinitely. Of just I love this person and we should be close forever because my affection for this person is just unwavering. But affection isn't enough to keep a friendship active. And that's the message I want all people of all ages to understand is you can have endless affection for someone, but it doesn't mean that that's enough to be in touch every day with someone. There needs to be an about, and the about needs to be clear and compelling. I spend a lot of time explaining this in the book about, I told this story of this one, my friend Adam, who donated his kidney to his friend Octavius. And what was remarkable about that story to me, aside from a friend, I mean, donating an organ to their other friend, which is like extreme heroics to me, was that their friendship started over comic books. The love of the comic books was the connective tissue of it. It ended up saving his life, but they didn't set out to save one another's to save his life. It's I love comic books and you love comic books. Let's like be friends. And that love of something else created, such a bond between them. And I really don't think people understand that about friendships enough is it's about something outside of the friend, something you both enjoy together, that you both want to seek out together. It's not just the interpersonal good feelings or affection. That's not enough. It maybe was enough when you lived, in rural 1600s and there were 20 people in your town. Like maybe that's enough to keep a friendship going forever. But we don't live like that anymore. We move around a ton. We have all sorts of different identities and choices and lifestyles, and things have fundamentally changed. It's not all gloom and doom. We just have to update our expectations accordingly.
As you were speaking, I was thinking about, you were talking about youth, right? And what you want younger people to know. And I'm hearing like this focus on figuring the about, right? Like it's not just affection that keeps friendships going. If you were to speak to your younger self, is there anything else you might add? Or, like the therapist in me wants to be like, you're trying your best and you're doing, like, but like, is there any other sort of advice or any way you would want to talk about modern friendship with your younger self?
Oh my gosh, younger me. I moved around so much. I was a
Mm.
pinball. And I would see other people that had these long-standing friendships, like, oh, I've known her since nursery school. I've known her since kindergarten. I'm like, well, I can't compete with that. I moved to North Shore of Chicago right before eighth grade, and there were 39 people in my class. And I was straight up like, I was the new jar of salsa on the shelf. I'm like, hey guys, I have poblanos in me. And they're like, we like just a pico de gallo. We don't know. We don't know what you're bringing to the table and we're not interested. So I've always had to make the case of like, I'm non-threatening. I will be nice. Like, please sit with me. And younger me, oh gosh, what would I tell her? I would tell her like to really work on being my own best friend and knowing my values. It's not up to us who they want to choose as their friend. I thought I had more power over it. It's more, what kind of friend do I want to be? What are my values? And I wish I could just see that it was more flexible. I mean, I just wanted safety and security and certainty of, you're my best friend, don't go anywhere. And then, of course, when when my best friend in eighth grade got a boyfriend and she wasn't available, it was this big crisis. And I just tried to hold on so tight. And I think that that's just something I had to learn. And now I have my best friend. I've been best friends with her for 15 years. And she's made other friends. And I'm like, I am so happy for you. That is wonderful. I love that you're making friends. Oh, I'd love to meet her. Wow, your new friend is great. That's like, I'm just so happy for my friends to make other friends and that they have a circle of support. Like, I never thought I'd feel like that. I thought I
Mm.
wanted, like, you're mine. You write the longest yearbook message in my yearbook. Like, it's just like really dominating. Who'd want to deal with that? And writing this book really, it's so different when you turn the camera on from you to other people of like, well, what's going on with them? Like, what kind of friend would they want in this stage of their life or they're having children or they're newly married? What kind of friend would they want? And is that me? I just feel like I have a more evolved perspective about friendships, and it's not so self-centered of like, well, I
Mm.
want friends. I want friends to care about me. I want friends to throw me a surprise party. I want friends to inundate me with love on my birthday. I want friends to, and now I don't think like that anymore. It's like, I'm just so lucky to have these people. I want them to have happiness and, so many friends. I want them to have a room full of friends that they love. And I'm so honored to be one of them.
Mm. It's
I'm gonna cry.
oh, I know. I'm like,
It's
oh,
such a shift of like, I
yeah,
want to be, I want to be support for these
right.
wonderful, wonderful people who deserve it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's such an evolution, right? Like
Mhm.
from younger self who, I
Yeah.
hear and can understand the scarcity, right? Especially if you moved around a lot. And to shift that perspective of how to show up is so is just so empowering as well, right? Like you don't have to be the victim in all these circumstances. Like you actually can stand up and take action and just be empowered to go after what you want, right? Be who you are. And yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think it's really apparent in the book how much self-reflection you've also done in journey. I'm sure a
Mm.
parallel experience alongside writing this book. I think that there's a lot of nuggets in this book that can be applicable to everyone, but I'm curious if you think that there is like an audience that will get the most out of this book.
I think people who've moved around a lot and have a collection of friends and they just feel guilt all the time about of, am I doing enough? Am I a good enough friend? Am I like botching the job? I really wanted to hone in on people who feel like they have 100 friends and zero friends. And I think that's such a modern conundrum. It's such an isolating feeling to feel like I know so many people. I know people love me. I don't know when I'll see them next. And I don't know why we'd get together. Like, it's just such a crazy feeling of like, I know these people love me. They're out there and they don't live near me. God, it reminds me of like Fievel from the American Tail, how he's like looking up at the moon. Like, there's people who love me under the same moon. That's what it feels like. We're all these little Fievels scrolling through these apps, being like, oh my God, I miss my friend. When am I gonna see her? Who knows? Oh, I miss this friend. Oh, she's in San Francisco. I'll never, when am I going there? Like, it's just constant, a barrage of just loneliness and sadness and alienation. Like, that's what people think of when they think of modern friendship. And I'm here to tell them, like, it does not have to be like this. It is literally pick a few wonderful people and be outstanding to a few people. And that's what we did when we were younger. When we were younger in like high school or college, whenever you think of that golden time of friendship in your life, you probably just had a few friends and you just focused on them. You didn't have all these multiple connections from different parts of your life. Like, you were just happy with what you had and you cared about these people and you were present for these people. And I'm just saying, like, let's go back to that. You already knew what you had to do to be happy with your friends. You can have it again. One of my favorite messages that I don't see other people saying when it comes to friendship is that, maybe your best friendships haven't happened yet. And I think people think of friendship as something when you're young and you have a lot of time and no responsibilities. And I'm here to say, listen, it's not too late. You can have the best friendships of your life. The dream is alive. Nothing's over. And it's never too late to start to understand these concepts. They're all very low lift. I'm not going to suggest anything out of one's comfort zone. It's really about looking around at who's in your life and learning how to be a wonderful friend to them and caring about what your closest friends care about is the quickest way to make sure that they keep you around. That's how people work. If you care about my kids, if you care about my life, my work, I want to keep you around. So that's the secret. I mean, it's so simple, but it's not a message that we hear ever with friends. We hear get rid of the toxic friend. Wow. We hear, wow, what is this? This person's not doing enough for you. This person isn't showing up. How do you get rid of them? And my book is how to not get rid of friends. It's like, how do you actually be a better friend? What behaviors are you doing that alienate your friends that you don't even know that you're doing? That's what I'm hoping people will understand with this book. And I'm a geek about this. Like I'm so excited to talk about this with you guys. But it's an empowering message. It's a hopeful message. Your best friendships haven't even happened yet. And you can have it. Anyone can have this.
It's simple yet kind of revolutionary because it hasn't necessarily been outlined like that before. So I really enjoyed the book, and I definitely enjoyed the kind of actionable items that were there. There was a lot to take away. I left ruminating quite a bit. Um,
Wonderful. It makes me so happy to hear that.
Well, we'll move on to your second book. We're staying on the theme of friendship. So the other book that you had picked, I had read last year, which is
Mm.
Big Friendship by Aminatou So and Anne Friedman. Were you a fan of Call Your Girlfriend?
I never really listened to the podcast, but I devoured the book. I was like, this book, it blew my mind. What did you guys think? What did you think of Big Friendship?
I really enjoyed it. Like I also didn't really listen to the podcast. I know my some of my friends did here because they did a live show at some point, but right before it finished. But I really liked just the idea of like a book on friendship because it's something that Amanda and I talk about quite a bit, and I was trying to do some research, and there's not really a lot out there. But I just loved the concept of reframing something like as a big friendship. Like that is your
Mm.
closest. It kind of goes back to what we were saying about how like you don't actually have the conversation with, like, hey, you're my best friend, like, other than, forcing them to wear like the other heart of a locket or something when you're a child. But, you're not really defining that as an adult. So I liked how open and honest they were in the book about it. And just, yeah, just like reading that was, yeah, it was quite refreshing. But yeah, what did you get out of this book?
I I love it's I read this when I first started reporting on friendships and I was like, whoa, like this is really cool how they're having a discussion, two friends about their friendship. I thought that just blew my mind. As I was reading it, I was like, well, I have answers for some of the questions they were raising. Like I'd reported on some of those things. And I found that it raised more questions for me. They talk about shine theory. And I'm like, well, how do you know if you're picking a good friend to do shine theory with? Like, well, what happens if what it just made me like ask more questions. And some of the things that they talked about, I was like, oh, I know what you could say to make that better. And it just made me want to raise my hand. I'm like, oh wait, I know what could help. And it made me want to answer those questions for people of, yeah, well, how do you get a friendship like that? And the big thing was, how do you know if you're picking a good person? Because we've had friends, friendship breakups, a busted tail tattered tale of friendship breakups. I'm like, well, how do I know if I'm picking good friends? Like, how do I know if I have good intuition? What is intuition? How do you know if you can trust your intuition with friends? And so this book, Big Friendship, was a portal for me of how do I dive deeper and really get at the heart of what modern friendship is.
I think it ties together very well. I was really curious about how, because they kind of describe like the big friendship is like, it's the bond of great strength and significance that follows you through different life stages and everything. And when we think about how you've sort of like the fluidity that we talked about earlier about like the bathtub, the jacuzzi, the swimming pool, I was kind of wondering where would a big friendship lie in that, or is the answer that it would evolve and flow?
I think this is a transition book of people really being scared of the transition that they're seeing happening and panicking of, well, we're so close. We have this great friendship. Like, how do we maintain it? How do we pin it in glass? How do we pin it up and make sure it stays? And it's not working with human nature. It's not working with people and their lives and their identities, changing identities. I don't know if I answered the question, but it's such a beautiful book and it really captures the poignancy, like how deep these friendships are. But we can make new friendships. It's not like we have to hold on so tight to this person that we went through our 20s with. We can have beautiful, meaningful, deep friendships at any time. It's not a scarcity thing. You just have to know how to play the music. Like this to me reads like someone I've been thinking a lot about obviously about bands and music. And I think people pick friends like music. Like, oh, this is my favorite bands. But my book is about how to read music, how to read the notes. Like,
Mm.
it doesn't matter who the person is. Like, it's like this is how to play a beautiful this is how to create beautiful music with any friend. You don't have to hold so tightly to one friend over another. It's really the art of friendship and practicing friendship with all sorts of people we meet in our life.
Kara and I have talked about how this book would have been a great book to read in our 20s because I feel like, 20s, mid 20s is when things start to really change. Like, for folks that go to college or university, they're kind of on the same path along through, and then it splinters into all these different directions. So you're confronted with these life changes that you maybe have not anticipated. So we talked about like, oh, this would have been great to read when I was 25 or, at an age where I was noticing these things and did not know how to cope or how to show up for people in their different life paths that they were starting to create. And in the book, the authors, their friendship moves into a working relationships. And, similar to Tara and I, like friendship and working together on this podcast. From your research, like, do you have any advice for people that are starting to work with close friends?
One of the first things I would talk about is how do we dissolve it? What's it going to look like when we don't want to work together anymore? How do we want to disassemble this? I wrote well, the first article I wrote for the New York Times was about what to do when you move in with someone. And that was a piece of advice one of my sources gave me about moving in with someone is, all right, well, let's just decide now when we happy and we love each other, who gets what, who gets the cat, who gets the sofa. And I thought that was just so elegant and smart of like, listen, here's the reality. We may not work together forever. I want to be your friend forever, hopefully. How can we how would we proceed if we don't want to work together anymore? That would be one of the first things so that you have a clarity of work versus friendship and what our goals are with the project. I've worked with friends, one of my best friends I work with, we can like it's almost like so fluid of we can go from work conversation to like normal friend conversation. But I can't do that with too many people. I mean, we really have a long history, so I've gotten to draw on that. But I mean, advice is really just be upfront and be mature and to say, to flag any issues before it becomes a problem or basically, what's your goal? What are our goals? And let's check in every few months. Are our goals the same? Are your goals changing? How can I help you as we change our goals? That would be, I mean, you guys are like so well positioned to, I'm sure, to overcome any kinds of any hiccups or, it's just inevitable that our interests are going to change. This is how we people are. Things that you may not control might happen. And just being
No,
flexible and open and accepting and being upfront of here are my goals.
I know. I mean, the
So you
first
can meet them
problem is that
full.
you're referring to this as work. What? Thought we were just having a laugh here, but no, it's fine.
Seems like we need to get aligned.
Oh
Oof.
my gosh.
But no, that's very helpful. But to go back to Big Friendship for a second, so both that book and your own book, Modern Friendship, are really vulnerable. Like you share a lot of personal stories, especially when you're sort of very open about like some friendship breakups that have happened. And I'm just curious about like how has writing about friendship changed your own friendships?
Well, it definitely helps when I'm researching why friendships break up. And that's like, oh, well, here's what happened. Oh, I thought this was like a unique, special, strange situation. And when you realize these breakups happen in a larger context of where are we in the world with our identities, with our own goals and dreams. It's like, oh, I'm not that special. Here's why friendships break up. And here's why I hesitated breaking up with a friend too. Like, I think there's not enough talk about when you don't feel comfortable breaking up a friendship because there's so much other pressure to keep the friendship going from your social circle. But I think that I was a blogger and writing about dating really served me well with this book because I have that blogger voice of like I'm here for the reader and I don't have any I don't really I don't want to say pretension, but it's like I just am so raw. It's like here's what I did and here's where I messed up and here's how I feel about it. And I really credit blogging for so many years that I would tap into that vulnerability and that trust with the reader of, listen, you're here. Like, I even open up my DMs. I'm like, here's what I've DM'd people. This is exactly, and here's what happened. Here are the outcomes with it. And I had a lot of fun with it. I don't take myself too seriously. Like, I'm just happy to be here. This is my attitude. I'm just happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I didn't think I'd get to have a second book. I've really been kicked around by life a bit. Like I don't have an ego. I just want to help. Like I want to help people understand this. And I I just felt really comfortable. I mean, it's really a testament to my publisher too that I felt so comfortable working with them. And I felt so confident writing about this and comfortable with it. I haven't heard from any of my ex-friends. I'm hoping they don't even know that I have a book out. But I try to be fair too of listen, I didn't know what I was doing and my own insecurities roared roared their heads and I just think it's so I was hoping it'd be refreshing just to hear someone be like, I mess up all the time. I don't know what I'm doing. This is why I report on it. So I can learn and I can frame it. I can help other people so they can make sense of their own hiccups too.
No, it certainly is refreshing. I like the honesty in both of the titles. So we usually sort of focus on like a more like clinical book, and it tends to be, like a nonfiction and then a fiction. So in that realm, I was kind of trying to think of fiction works about female friendships. And I was having a hard time with it. I found a Reddit thread that included women talking. Sure, there's a bunch of women in that, but it's not about friendship. It's about the patriarchy. Like maybe you read that again. And then Elena Ferrante tops all of the lists, and I haven't read that yet. But it's definitely
Me
on
neither.
the top of my pile. And springing this on you, but I'm just wondering, is there any work of
Hmm.
fiction about friendship that really inspires you?
I mean, there's always like insecure, like there's always HBO shows of friendships. Sex in the City is such a touch point. Like I think it's such an aspirational, like people want these friendships that stay in place and that there's this predictability to. And I think it just sort of sets people up for disappointment that we don't have brunch with our friends every Sunday. Like that's just not realistic for
And
most people.
the same for friends as well. You're
The
like, there's
same
no
for
way.
friends that like all want to be friends with each other. That's unusual, I would imagine. Let me think. I'm trying to think of what friendships that I've liked recently. I like friendships with men and women. I was thinking about the friendship with Kamala Harris and Tim Walls, and I was thinking about how beautiful it is when different genders can be friends.
Mhm.
You know, I love Mythic Quest, the Apple show. I don't know if you've seen it with
Rob
Rob McElhenney.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the woman who plays Poppy. And I just love I love friendships with men and women because I love having guy friends. I really it's historically new for different genders to be friends even. Like there's so little research on it. Like it's really only been since the 70s that they've done studies on, friendships between men and women. And I love friendships I love depictions that show men and women can be friends, and it can be a meaningful friendship. It can be a enduring friendship. I love that. I love that there's all different flavors of friendships. I'm trying to think of another good man and woman friendship that are just um I'm sure people listening are thinking of some too. But then,
Amanda, do you have anything, Amanda, as I spring the question on you?
I mean, I think on the I couldn't think of anything that was like a female friendship, but thinking about the book Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, I think is, I mean, such a beautiful book and really just shows sort of the struggle within a relationship, a friendship, right? Like that book is, I think, just so excellent. And yeah, just thinking about the two sort of main characters, like what a challenge to have to overcome. And I don't want to give away if people haven't read the book, but I think it really feels like a realistic depiction of a friendship and one that they're trying to work together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really copped out with not answering the question at all. So
that was great.
Thank you for playing.
Your answer.
No, I'm the question answer for the asker for this one. I don't have an answer. Oh,
maybe I'll write the friendship fiction book.
Please.
Yes, please. Yeah, well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. I've really enjoyed it, and the conversation of friendship has been a big one for Tara and I. And so yeah, like I said, I was just so excited when I came across your book, and it feels so active, and you use humor, you use like personal stories. Like I just think it's such a good, readable and actionable book. And so I guess I'm curious for listeners, like where can people find you online? Like where else are you?
Yeah, I also write the Substack called Friendship Explained. And my goal with the Substack is to highlight, all sorts of issues about friendship that don't get a lot of airtime, and to explain the friendships we're seeing. I use a lot of pop culture text of like, well, here's what's going on here, and here's what we can learn from, Survivor. Like here's what Survivor tells us about friendship. Here's what this 80s movie tells us. I have a lot of fun with it. You can find me on Instagram at Anna Goldfarb. And thank you so much for having me. I love that you guys listen. I know it's such a labor of love to read these books and prepare. And it means so much to me that you took the time to read and engage with my work. And I just thank you for having me on. This was fantastic.
Thanks for listening to Books from Your Therapist. If you're interested in the books we talked about, we'll include links in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to us with your own recommendations, or maybe you're a mental health practitioner or an author who is interested in coming on to share, you can email us at booksfromyourtherapist@gmail.com.
Happy showing up in your friendships.
Happy swimming in the jacuzzi and the bathtub and the swimming pool of your different friendship levels.